Now, there's a problem. And I don't know if this is your problem, Ekanta, but the problem for many of us is if someone hurts us in a way that we judge as extremely unjust or extremely wrong or extremely harmful, then there's this little voice that says they don't deserve to be forgiven. They need to apologize, right? And so I have a little mantra for you all. They may not deserve to be forgiven, but I deserve to forgive them. And because if I don't forgive them, then I will suffer by carrying resentment in my heart. So I deserve to forgive them. And as we said yesterday, we read a verse, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased with those devotees who forgive. So now I have a choice. Do I want to hold on to my resentment and punish myself, number one, because we're all good at punishing ourselves. I don't think anyone punishes us as well as ourselves. And number two, do I want to relinquish the opportunity to please Krishna by saying, I'm not going to forgive? And I was just reading a letter the other day where Prabhupada was being a little cautious about giving Brahminical initiation. And so he was saying things like, well, we can't give someone Brahminical initiation if they don't get up early in the morning, if they're not clean and so forth. In other words, if they don't live like Brahmins, we can't give them Brahminical initiation. Okay, so here is an interesting point, because Prabhupada said the foremost quality of a Brahmin is to forgive. Did you know that he said that? The foremost quality. And so, we are either initiated as Brahmins or living, at least supposed to be living in a sattvic way. And so, you could look at Brahminical activities like study and deity worship, but Samadhamastaposocham Shantirajabhamevacha, those are all virtues. We have to look at those also. And why is forgiveness a Brahminical quality? Because it's, at least from the material perspective, it's sattvic, and resentment is tamasic. And so we know, at least we can't blast off to Braj by Kunta from Tamagun. The launching pad is in Sattvagun, right? That's where we launch into our spiritual life from a lifestyle that's sattvic, which is, in other words, a Brahminical. So now, Ekanta, I have a question for you. If you were in that person's position, there's this person you're having a difficult time forgiving. If you were in their position, would you, now as them, want you to forgive them? Okay, well, let's make it clear. Let's say I'm the one that a Kanta. No, let's say Navikishore, you're the one she can't forgive. You did something. You know you did it or you don't know it, right? So now we're asking Ekanta, if you were Navikishore, would you want forgiveness? The answer, of course, is yes, I would. Of course you would. Now, I was once told an interesting concept. This was like 35 years ago. I hadn't thought of it. How we certainly would want to be forgiven. Yet it's quite strange that we wouldn't forgive someone. So it was put in this way. I want mercy for myself, but I want justice for others. That's interesting, right? I deserve mercy, but not others. They must get punished. They get justice, right? Of course, that's not the proper attitude of a Vaishnava, is it? So what I found in my own life, that if we've been offended by someone and if we're dealing with the struggle to forgive, it's actually this amazing opportunity to learn so many things and purify our heart. Like it's a fantastic opportunity. And so if we fail, we've lost a huge opportunity. Because to forgive, we have to be able to say, I have been hurt by this person, but I'm not going to hold on to it. I am going to be benevolent, compassionate, kind. I don't want to see anyone suffer. You know, Ekanta, sometimes I'm just picking on you because you shared, you were bold enough to share, but this is for everybody. Sometimes when we are hurt by someone, we tell other people about it. And sometimes we tell other people about it because we want to process it. We want to make sense of it. But sometimes we talk about it because we want other people to know how bad this person was, what they did. And when we talk about it to let others know what they did, that is our way of getting revenge, because now other people know how bad they are. So that's kind of like our weapon. And there couldn't be anything further from the heart of a devotee than to punish somebody, to go around punishing them just in the form of revenge. And this is really important, because if we see this kind of revenge within our heart, it's a huge red flag. As I was saying yesterday, what we tend to see is, well, I got up at 4, I went to Mangalarti, I chanted my rounds, I went to Bhagavatam class. We see those things. So that's good. I'm not minimizing those things, but there are other things we tend not to see that are red flags. And this is a huge red flag, because it's connected with, if we're resentful, it's connected to many things. And Ekanta, in your statement, you kind of summarized in 2 or 3 sentences, or you connected directly, indirectly to practically everything we said. And there's something we didn't say that I want to mention, and it's very important. What you said is, this is my interpretation of the event. This is how this event happened, and this is how I felt. And we also mentioned something which we've all seen, is that another person may have been treated another person, if they were treated the same way, may have had a different reaction. And just like right now, I'm talking to different devotees about the world situation, and different people have different reactions to what's going on. Some are angry, some are compassionate, some want to hide, some want to fight, because we're different. And it's the same event. So why do we have different interpretations? Is it because this is actually what happened? Or is it because we're different people and we interpret things differently? So let's say I feel betrayed by someone, and therefore I feel resentful. Usually, if I feel betrayed, it's because I have a very strong need for honesty, like maybe an exaggerated need for honesty. I know some people, when there's injustice, they go ballistic. They can't stand it. They can't deal with it. There's, in our movement, this leader did this, and they stay up for 3 nights. They can't deal with it. Like, the world has to be a just world, and if it isn't, they become very, very angry. Not everyone's like that, but some people are. So if they're treated unjustly, it's very likely that resentment will build up in their heart based on that, because they need justice. Or if honesty and truthfulness in a relationship is extremely important, then when you don't get it, then you'll likely have a resentment. And so every resentment is connected to our nature and because if I ask you what caused the resentment, you'll say, well, it was because I was betrayed, or it was because I was expecting affection, but I was criticized, or I was expecting affection, I didn't get enough of it. I was expecting appreciation, I was put down. If you look at that, what you were expecting, you'll start to see that it's part of your nature. And why? Why would you expect that? Why would I expect to be appreciated? Maybe I grew up in a family where I was appreciated all the time. And I did some wonderful seva and I didn't get appreciated. Or maybe I grew up in a family where I was never appreciated. And I'm in negative numbers of appreciation because I didn't get it. I need it now as an adult. And if I don't get it, I get upset with the person. Whereas someone else who was just raised not being overly appreciated or overly critical, if they're not appreciated, it doesn't really bother them because they're okay. So we're always thinking it's the person who did what they did, but it's actually what they did can help us be aware of why we got upset because of our own need. And then you realize, well, actually, if I didn't have that need, I wouldn't got upset because the person next to me wasn't upset. Let me put this in interesting perspective. You're probably aware that Prabhupada initiated about 5,000 devotees, and there are probably thousands more that were alive when Prabhupada left that he didn't initiate. So let's throw out a figure like 7,000. 7,000 Prabhupada disciples. How many Prabhupada disciples have you seen in your life? 100, 200, 300, 50, 40? Like, where are they? There was like 7,000. Well, okay, initiated 5,000. There are probably like 400-600 active, maybe 800 active in ISKCON. But if you go to Delhi, go in the temple for Mangalarti, how many Prabhupada disciples are there? 1 or 0. In Vrindavan, a little more, but not that many, right? Where are they? What happened? When Prabhupada left, some of the people closest to him, who were his personal servants, were the first to leave because they had this need for that personal association. And so, but my point is, there are many dedicated disciples of Prabhupada that are still in ISKCON. And needs are different, reactions were different. So we're reacting to the same event, and some will be very critical of the GBC or critical of ISKCON in general. Some will be working to improve it, and if they're ever critical, it's only because they want to improve it. We're different. We respond differently. I have some godbrothers who are very, very hurt by the way they perceive they've been treated, and others not, but we were all treated the same way. So some have left, and they're very angry and upset. You're probably aware of this. And this could happen to you when your Guru Maharaj goes, when all the Prabhupada disciples are gone. The movement will be different. It won't be exactly the same. You could get upset, or you could become compassionate and work with it, or you could disappear and cry. There are different reactions. And whatever reaction you have, you'll probably blame it on the one event that we all reacted differently to. So it's the saying, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. So what I have found in my work on forgiveness was just an accident. It happened accidentally, but it opened up a lot of realization. Was that it's really never the event or the person. It's just something within me that's being activated by the event or the person. So if I can stop thinking about the person and start thinking what inside of me got activated that I need to purify, let go of, heal, understand, work on, then we make progress. But if I think it's the person, I get stuck, and I could be stuck my whole life. And I have a story for you, just to scare you. Am I allowed to scare VIHE students? Is that okay? I think that's one of the qualities of a sadhu. They're supposed to like do an operation on you with their words. It's not such a scary story, but I would say it's an alarming story. So you remember the story of the Daksha Yajna, or as Prabhupada would say in his Bengali accent, Daka. The Daksha Yajna, in which Lord Shiva was in meditation. And so when Daksha came, Lord Shiva was in trance, he didn't notice. So he didn't stand up to respect him, and Daksha was very upset. And what ensued was a horrible fight, and Daksha, his head, in the fight, he lost his head, not figuratively, but literally, his head was chopped off. Well, he lost his head and figuratively, and then he literally lost his head in the fight. And out of compassion, the Brahmins said, can we save him? And he was saved. As I remember the story, a goat head, right? Is that correct? Head of a goat. And then he apologized for his offense. But the acharyas say something very interesting. They say his apology was not a complete apology. Have you ever received an apology and you kind of feel like they're not really apologizing entirely? They're kind of just doing it because if they don't, something bad will happen to them, or they kind of mean it, but not fully. Well, it was apology like that. And well, the interesting thing is, if you remember in Bhagavatam, that Narada Muni came and met the sons of Daksha in his next life, who he was training to be Prajapatis. And he said, well, you're doing this austerity to become Prajapatis. You have this Shakti that you can do austerity, so better you just continue as brahmacharis. So Daksha was pretty upset. But he restrained himself. But Narada Muni did it again. Narada Muni is thinking, if they can do all this tapasya, they probably really don't need to be married. And they can just go straight, take the shortest distance between birth and liberation. So you don't really, if you don't need to be married, you don't need to live that life, you can live without it, then why not do that? So the second time it happened, Daksha became really upset and he got angry at Narada Muni. And you may remember the story, Narada Muni didn't say anything. He was doing empathic listening, we could call it. He was just listening and letting Daksha process his anger, and Narada Muni just listened. Normally the gurus don't do that. They give instruction. This time Narada Muni saw it best just to let Daksha speak. So Daksha was very angry at Narada Muni, did it twice. And so in the commentary, they made an interesting point. They said that in Daksha's apology, as we mentioned, it wasn't complete. So he still had resentment within him. He had purified some of it, but not completely. He still had resentment within him. And therefore, in his next life, he had to come back to work on that more. And then we see the truth of the fact that he didn't purify himself in the last life because it was still there. So that's kind of scary in a sense. Of course, Prabhupada never told us specifically, if you have resentment, you will come back. If you have anger, you will come back. But it's actually true. I mean, what does it mean to be a pure devotee? It means to be free from all these things as far as possible. So the point I'm trying to make is these things are contaminations which we maybe don't take as seriously as we should. and they're blocking our bhakti. You remember that story, Parsuram and the Kamadhenu cow, and the Kamadhenu cow was stolen, and then Parsuram, it was stolen when he wasn't there, and then he found out about it, and he went to take revenge on those who stole it. And its father said, "We're Brahmins. We don't do those things." Remember that story? It's interesting. We're Brahmins. We don't do that, right? So I think that's important for us, and that's where the quote, the foremost quality of a Brahmin is forgiveness. That's where it came from. That story. So I think this is an important realization for all of us. Even though I'm feeling it, I understand it's about me and my contamination. This person was just a catalyst. And this is not the way we as devotees live. We don't cultivate these things because these things actually get in the way of our bhakti. They're not part of bhakti. They're part of material consciousness. I have a story for you. This is one of my favorite stories. It's really, really powerful. And it really drives this point home. And the reason it's powerful is that what I'm talking about now, I think we can all see it makes perfect sense and it's important. But when you study Prabhupada's books, sometimes you can overlook certain things and think they're not important because they don't come up in every third purport. You know, surrender to Krishna comes up in every third purport. But this is also part of surrender, but it's just not specific. So I think the story will help us understand that. So I don't know what year things changed, but when I was young, I can't remember what year this changed. Maybe sometimes in the 80s, but previous to the 80s, you could smoke on airplanes. And smoking was quite normal in the 70s. And sometimes you'll see the old rock bands and they all have cigarettes and they put cigarettes on their guitars and everybody was smoking. That was like cool. And then at some point, people realized it's really bad for your health and secondhand smoke. And so they made a rule on the airplane that you can't smoke because it bothers people. It's also probably dangerous, but I think it was just out of respect for people. But previously they had sections. If you wanted to smoke, you would sit in this section. So you were asked, do you want to sit in a smoking section or not? And in those days, flying was like taking a bus. You just go to the airport and say, when's the next flight to such and such, you know, and then you just buy the ticket's the same price. It's like getting on a bus. When's the next bus to so-and-so? And then they'd ask you because it was never full because they had so many flights and gasoline, petrol was very inexpensive. And so you want to sit in smoking or non-smoking. So Prabhupada was on a flight and there were some people in the non-smoking section that were smoking and it was close to Prabhupada. So Prabhupada's servant called the flight attendant and asked her to tell them to please not smoke. So he was doing it for Prabhupada, but probably, I'm sure, also for himself, as the story will reveal. So it was a soccer team on their way to South Africa. And I guess the soccer team thought they owned the airplane or something, or owned the universe because they're soccer players. You call it football. Maybe you call it football in your country. Call it soccer in America. And so they started smoking again. And again, the devotee called the flight attendant, who in those days was called a stewardess. That's what they called them. Say, could you ask them to stop smoking? And Prabhupada stopped him. And he said, just tolerate it. The other people are tolerating. If you can't tolerate, what's the difference between you and everyone else? Well, in this case, probably worse than everybody else. But Prabhupada meant you're a devotee, so if you're not tolerating, then how can you distinguish yourself as being special or better or distinct or unique. I'm a devotee. I'm special. How are you special? Everyone's tolerating it but you. So we can apply this story in so many ways. You know, you ever in a long line and you're in a rush or you just hate lines and you're the only one in the line agitated and everyone else isn't. And like, what's the difference between you and everyone else? Oh, the only difference is I'm worse than everybody else in that situation, right? So that story was told to me by the devotee that it happened to, and it went very deep in my heart because I started thinking, yeah, as I said yesterday, we have this problem that as devotees we somehow assume we're better. And Prabhupada's saying, why should you assume you're better if you're acting like everybody else? What right do you have to call yourself a devotee? Like, what is the difference between you and everyone else? Shouldn't there be a difference? Okay, everyone else is resentful, but you're a devotee. You're Brahminical, or supposed to be. And you're resentful. That's not right. Something wrong with that picture. Does that make sense? Yeah. Just what you said, Ekanta, has stimulated all kinds of ideas. I may respond to your question as a whole class, your comment. Another thing that helped me tremendously, and this is so simple and obvious, I don't know why I didn't get it. I read it in a book. And it was what we were talking about yesterday. If you kill a skunk, your hand will smell. That when we hold on to resentment, the person who suffers is not the person we're resenting, but ourselves. And I just want to scare you a little bit. Some of you may have some knowledge of mind-body relations, but there's a lot of research on mind-body relations that wasn't available 20 years ago. When I started teaching forgiveness, I was looking for mind-body studies. There are very few. But now there are many, many studies. And we know the effects of stress on the body. You know, people who have under a lot of stress, they have weaker immune systems. And it can cause all kinds of diseases all the way up to cancer. And so holding on to resentment is a form of stress and toxicity. And it can have very, very harmful effects on the body. And this is documented, even up to causing cancer. So what to speak of the psychological and then ultimately the spiritual effect. So if we hold on to resentment, it is a supreme form of inflicting self-punishment. And we carry this resentment with us, and the resentment is punishing. We're punishing ourselves because we have to carry it with us every day. And that person that you have resentment towards, for the rest of your life, you're going to have this negative feeling. I don't know if I mentioned this quote. Yeah, I mentioned this quote yesterday. Okay, here is the gold standard. Here is the gold standard of pure devotional service. I only desire the greatest good for my worst enemy. That's the gold standard. And that's why we did that exercise, just to see how difficult, what's the condition of your heart? Let's check in. Okay, your worst enemy, can you desire the greatest good? If you can't, some more work has to be done, right? So this person doesn't deserve my forgiveness, but I deserve my forgiveness. I deserve to forgive this person for my own sake. That's one realization. Now, here's another realization that's important, because we're starting to understand now that the resentment issue is within me, not within them. And they're just a catalyst. And, what they did is just waking me up to understand more about myself. Like, why did I get so upset because of what they did? What's going on with me? That is how you learn. That is the easiest way to let go, when you realize it's because of me and my past experience and the way I process and what I was expecting. What were you expecting you didn't get? That ends up causing the problem. If that expectation is connected with your nature, then that's why we can't let it go. So, do you think that person woke up that morning and said, this morning I'm going to find a kanta and I'm going to offend her so much that she's going to have resentment? Probably not. Even if that person did something horrible to you, probably it wasn't intentional. It was probably out of their control. Generally, we would say in most cases, even if it was some horrendous thing, horrendous abuse, it usually was not that they were trying to do it. It's just that's what they do. You ever notice how some people just, like, by existing, they just hurt people? That's just what they do. And they could be good people, but that's just how they exist. So, and I think some of you know about generational abuse. Father abuses the son. Next generation, the son abuses his son. Next generation, that son in the same way. Or the father abuses the wife. Next generation, the son abuses his wife. Or the mother abuses his father. Next generation, the daughter abuses her husband. It's and this is true, especially of sexual abuse. Of people who were sexually abused as children often end up have a difficult time controlling themselves sexually, and sometimes abuse others. And it's not that they want to; it's just become a problem. So it's good to know that often the people who abuse you didn't intend to do it. It's just what they did. And sometimes they don't even know that you were hurt. And sometimes, this is going deeper. This is an interesting question for you. Sometimes they're responding to something you did first and you don't realize it. You hurt them first and you think they initiated the hurt, but they were actually responding to it. That's an interesting question to ask. And sometimes I've realized in myself, and this is something for you to all think about, when we're hurt, we're thinking, I would have wanted them to behave in a certain way, but they didn't. Now ask yourself the question, have you behaved in that way towards them? And often you'll realize, no, the behavior I want from them, I haven't given to them either, which is interesting, isn't it? I'm expecting a behavior that even I don't give to them. So if we want to develop compassion, we have to get into the heart of another person and try to understand, why did they do that? I will tell you my story, and this will help you. Hare Krishna. Did you hear that thunder? No, you didn't. Oh, okay. Yeah. It's only thunder. So in 1986, one of our GBC men, who was also a guru, who I had worked with fairly closely, and at that point, most of the people in the zone were his disciples. And he had some spiritual trouble. And we saw that he had trouble, but he was denying it. He never discussed it with us. But in those days, well, not even in those days, you can imagine when a zone is mostly the disciples of one guru, you could imagine what happens when the guru leaves or the guru has trouble. It's devastating. And we've been through that many times. Not many, but we've been through it. Once is too many. We've been through it in different times in the history of ISKCON. It's a devastating event. So he had a spiritual problem. He was a sannyasi, and he gave up his sannyas. He gave up his position as guru, and he moved in with his family to work with his family. And then he went and got married. The problem, it had many problems, but one of the things that affected me was he didn't tell us. We found out by getting a hold of the letter that he sent to his disciples that he had left. He didn't tell the leaders. So I felt very betrayed, completely betrayed. And I developed this deep resentment. So I had two realizations from this, which I think are important. This went on for, it was 1986. It went on for, I think, 19 years I held on to it. And then I went through a forgiveness process and let it go. And I had two realizations after forgiving. One was I actually left him and his zone. I was a leader in his zone. And I'd become somewhat frustrated with the way he was running the zone. And I actually left. I just said, I'm leaving. I can't do this. And I had a pretty big position. So I didn't realize it, but I actually betrayed him first. Isn't that interesting? That I was focusing on his betrayal. And it wasn't until I forgave that I realized I had betrayed him. That was so weird. You know how blind we are to our own faults. The second thing happened, I think, was even deeper or more important. And maybe you can reflect on this in your own experience with someone you're trying to forgive or have forgiven. After I forgave, it took some compassion to forgive, because you can't hate someone and forgive them. You have to get over that resentment. You have to, and replace it with something better. So when I forgave and went through, studied in the forgiveness process, we study about compassion, like what it looks like, what it is, how it manifests. And I realized when he left, my resentment totally covered up my compassion, because what I should have done, which I later came to realize, was number one, he was sincere, and and in that sincerity, the reason he stepped down is because so many before him did not step down. They just fell down. So he thought, better I step down before I fall down, and I can leave gracefully in a moral way. And then I can go and say, I think I need to be grihasta, rather than fall in love as a sannyasi and have an affair, which is what was happening. So I didn't see that. I was so angry I didn't see that. So he did something which was honorable, and honorable in the sense that he was willing to publicly admit his mistake, which required humility. So that was honorable. And the thing that really hit me most deeply was that we had worked together very closely. So we were fairly close. And I was quite angry with him, so I didn't talk to him. I just inherited a temple that was in shambles, basically, after he left. And devotees' lives that were in shambles. And I had, to pick up the pieces. But I realized what I should have done was stay in touch with him and say, I'm here for you. I understand what you're doing. And if you need any help, if you want a friend, here I am. I didn't do that. And I realized that's what I should have done. But because I was overcome by resentment, it covered my compassion. So that was a good realization. And you can look at your own life and see if your resentment is covering your compassion, because if it is, you know what Prabhupada says about compassion. It is the essential quality of a Vaishnava, the most essential. The distinguishing quality of a Vaishnava over other spiritualists is their compassion. And I thought I was compassionate. And why did I think I was compassionate? Because I would go out and distribute books and go out and preach. I must be compassionate, right? Have to be compassionate to do that, right? And so here I am, not realizing that I'm not compassionate, not showing compassion to this person, and allowing myself to believe that I am compassionate. That was such a deep realization. And I'd like you to, you can reflect on your own experience, if this is going on with you. Pulasta Muni has a question or wants to share. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Haribol.
I guess that after years of being part of ISKCON, when these things happen, with experience, we try to not react immediately when this kind of situation occur. I think that's one lesson that I've learned. Don't react immediately. And then always go, try to, on a practical level, go to the Shastra and see whether there are any examples about forgiveness and what these personalities did. For example, you see in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, you have the example of Draupadi. When Ashwatthama was there, he said what to do. Arjuna would have done one thing. Krishna did not say anything, but Draupadi said, no, I cannot kill this person. Because then, his mother would suffer like me. So I don't want anybody else to suffer. On the other side of the scale, you have the example of Karna, who held a grudge all his life. And what happened to him in the end? He ended up in, although his birth was quite noble in a way, because he was the son of Kunti, although he was not legitimate, but at the same time, that grudge started a whole series of events that then, escalated to a level that he lost his life in the battle, but ungloriously in a way. So I noticed that whenever this kind of heavy lesson come to us, it's better not to react on the spur of the moment, but rather wait, and then take a, like a distance from it and think of it, but not in a way that disturbs us.
Definitely.
That's my kind of experience in a way.
Yeah, I can add something to that also, which is a beautiful question to ask. And this fits into what I was saying. Like we were saying yesterday, we place meaning, anytime something happens, we just naturally place meaning to it. What does this mean? It's good, it's bad, it's compassionate, it's enviousness, it's unfair, it is fair. We put meaning on it, right? And the problem is when we put meaning on it, we can put meaning on it that ends up degrading our response. What does it mean? It means he's a demon. No, he's been a devotee all his life. No, he's a demon. He should be kicked out of ISKCON. That's a meaning, right? It's not the right meaning. So, like you're saying, we should wait, because our emotions are flying and we could make bad judgments. But a question we can ask as part of the waiting process is, what else could it mean? Because by saying what else could it mean, we're really saying, okay, what would the Shastra say? Or what would Prabhupada say? What would my spiritual masters say? What would my mentors say? What would Narada Muni say? What would Narada Muni say about this? So what else can it mean is a beautiful question, because you realize, like in my case, what else could it mean? It could mean that I should be compassionate. That's another reaction. I had a very bad reaction. And what you say is also true. There's so many stories of forgiveness in the Bhagavatam. Isn't it interesting when you go through the Bhagavatam, you told about Draupadi. I mean, look at Prahlad Maharaj. That's like, forgiveness on steroids. Like that's forgiving your father who tried to kill you, Mm. And then we have Durvasa Muni offending Ambarish Maharaj. We have Thakur Haridas being beaten. Classic example of forgiveness where he's praying for the welfare of those who are beating them. And the story we told about Parsuram and his father Jamandagni telling him that we must forgive, and Krishna forgiving Shishupal 100 times. And so isn't it interesting with all those stories staring at us from the pages of Bhagavatam? We could actually be resentful. And what I've learned from this is how much our conditioning, our emotional state and conditioning affects our vision in such a way that we can't even see through the eyes of Shastra because we're seeing through the eyes of our emotion, which is exactly why you said, don't make a decision then, because your emotions are clogging your vision. Step back. But the question, what else could it mean, is really important when the emotions are high, because then it forces us to look at it from a different way. And it's an interesting story. There was I met this hypnotherapist had a center, and he wanted us to do kirtan, and so we went to meet him and talk about it. And he had a question. He said, I was doing some therapy with one of your people, and I suggested forgiveness. And I asked him if forgiveness exists in his scripture, and he said, no, it doesn't. And this person was saying, does it exist? And I said, oh yeah, it exists in many places. But this devotee thought it didn't even exist, which is quite interesting. I think that quote I quoted yesterday from Bhaktivinoda Thakur was quite eye-opening. Not only does it exist, but it exists as one of the primary ingredients of bhakti. So, in learning to forgive, I learned a lot about emotions. Emotions are like thoughts. You observe them. You observe your thoughts. We know that. We sometimes tell people, you're not the mind because you can observe your thoughts. And if you can observe something, you must not be it. But have you ever identified with your mind? Yes. The mind says, do this. We do it because we've identified it. We're no longer observing it. Have you ever identified with emotions? We always identify. So if you're interested, we have a website called bhaktisupport.org, and we have forgiveness courses on there. We have a basic course, which is about 5 hours, and then we have a longer course. It could be 20 hours, very intensive. If you want to go further, and then we get more into these kinds of things. You do exercises where you have to really penetrate and think about these things. But you will understand a lot about your emotional state and your own psychology when you're dealing with these things, and how you react. And you'll start to realize that your reactions are pretty similar for every difficulty. Like, it's not like you have 100 different reactions for 100 different problems. You should have the same reaction. And then it starts to become clear. It must not be the situation. It must be my reaction, and how Krishna conscious is that reaction. So one of the things that we teach, and that has helped me a lot, is that just like you're not the mind, you're not your emotion. So if you ever say I'm angry, that's completely false. You have to say I'm feeling angry because you're spirit soul. So you can't say I'm angry. You can only say I am spirit soul. Aham brahmasmi. You can't say aham krodha. Aham kama. I'm lusty. No, that's not your identity. That's what you're feeling. And so this is an important realization, right? I am not the emotion. I'm experiencing the emotion, but I identify so much with my body that I identify with the emotion, the mind and the emotion. No, I'm not angry. I'm feeling. They even have sometimes therapists will say, if you're ever angry, like with someone, just tell them calmly, I'm feeling a lot of anger towards you right now. Instead of screaming, just calmly say, I'm feeling a lot of anger. So you can detach from it and watch it and let it go. So Kosturika, do you have a comment or question?
Question, Maharaj. Please
Yes.
accept my humble obeisances. Sorry that I joined a little late, but I have two questions, if you don't mind.
Yes.
One is, lately I was also realizing that I don't have compassion. I'm engaged in book distribution service. So I started to realize that, I really don't have compassion. But after listening to you about compassion, a thought came to me that how much compassion can I hold? Because I am by myself very tiny and I am not Krishna. So what capacity of compassion I can show on others, So how do
let me take the question. Well, you could ask that question about any Vaishnav quality. How much tolerance can I show? How much mercy can I show? And ultimately, to be a Vaishnava, we have to at least practice those qualities. Maybe I'm not a compassionate person, but I have to practice it. That's where it starts. I think that's what Prabhupada was saying. What's the difference between you and another person? Practice tolerance. Be aware where I could be more compassionate and I'm not showing it, and fake it till I make it. That it has to, sadhana is a practice. So even if I don't feel like doing something, or even if I see I don't have that quality, it's not an excuse not to practice it. Because the compassion is coming from Prabhupada down to us. So we have to give it. Right? So even if I don't want to give it, even if I'm not compassionate, I at least have to deliver it. That much compassion I have. And I have to, Prabhupada told us that people are suffering and we should care. And so I might think, I don't really care that much, but Prabhupada said I should care. So now I have to ask myself, how can I develop that care? I want to share a thought with you that might help you. Two thoughts that might help. We were doing forgiveness workshop, and one devotee shared a realization that I thought was beautiful. He said, Mahaprabhu has forgiven us of all our past sins. Or our spiritual master, Prabhupada, we're forgiven. So now that we're forgiven, do we have in any way the right not to forgive others? He said it's a paradox, right? So you've been given compassion. Do you have a right not to be compassionate? I don't think so. It's like we don't have that right. It doesn't make sense. Like I give you $1 billion and you won't give $1 to anybody. That doesn't make sense. And you say, well, it's your money. You gave it to me. I'm not really a billionaire. Well, you are now because it's been given to you. So you're a billionaire in compassion, aren't you? You've been given Mahaprabhu's compassion. And so by practicing that, it will develop within you. The other thing, and you can all meditate on this, is that it's perennial wisdom that we tend to treat in general, maybe not in every situation, but we tend to treat other people the way we treat ourselves. So if you're really hard on yourself, you tend to be hard on others. Yeah. Why did you eat 2 gulab jamuns? they used to have a jar of, they used to make gulab jamans, right? And so there was this one devotee who was really, really strict with everybody because he was very strict with himself. So they'd have all these gulab jamans left over on Sunday, and they would take the gulab jamans and they would put them in their cereal. They would eat oatmeal or something, or cereal made with farina, with suji. And the devotees are putting all these gulab jamans. This is the beginning of the movement. And this one devotee is very strict. And he goes, only 2. You can't eat more than 2. And so the devotees went to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, so-and-so is telling us we can only eat 2. Prabhupada said, you can eat as many as you want, but so-and-so, he can only eat 2. So how we treat ourselves is generally how we treat others. And so self-compassion means I take care of my spiritual life. I'm kind to myself. I take the time to perform sadhana. I take care of my health. I take care of my life in general, body, mind, soul. I take care of myself. I'm compassionate to myself. I will tend to be more compassionate to others. I'm kinder to myself. I'm kinder to others. Generally, I'm more tolerant with myself. I'm more tolerant with others. That's a, there could be exceptions here and there, but that's a general rule. So that's something to look into also. Am I being compassionate? Am I taking the time to give myself Krishna consciousness? Am I taking the time to chant good rounds, to read Prabhupada's books, to nourish myself? That kind of compassion for myself, it will tend to overflow more naturally when you're distributing books. So see if that helps. Okay,
yes,
go ahead.
Yes, my friend has shared this one. She had an argument with another person, and she finished the argument, and somehow it ended up. But she wrote to me saying that oftentimes, her mind says that, oh, you should have said this. Oh, you should have said this.
Oh, yeah.
But she told me that she doesn't want to go back and start the dialogue. But at the same time, she's not able to control the mind. So does it mean she hasn't forgiven the person?
Yeah, to some degree. It also may mean that it could mean other things also. It could be a very important issue that's not resolved and it's weighing heavy on her. It could be that she has a strong need to be right, to win. Maybe not. Whenever there's upset like that and you can't let go of something, there's always deeper things going on inside. If it's not connected with some deeper problem, you usually can let it go. So I wouldn't know what the problem is, but sometimes it's connected with problems we're not even consciously aware of. I'll tell you a story. Maybe this will help you because maybe you could help her. But one devotee went to one of my forgiveness workshops, and it was like a 3-day workshop. And at the end, it's very rare someone doesn't let go after that, of going through like 25 exercises. So she didn't let go. And so we were talking. And I said, well, what's your issue? And she said, my issue is with the ashram leader. And I said, what's the issue? And she said, I just don't like her. I can't put my finger on it. It's not like she's a bad person. I just don't like her. And it took 2 hours of talking to her to figure out what was going on. And I had to just listen to her before she realized it. And she said, my father, she was, I think they were raised in India, but her father lived most of the time in Dubai, and he made a lot of money, but he was always absent. And she saw how her mother suffered because she really didn't have a husband. He just sent them money. And she said, the ashram leader reminded me of my father, and I became like the mother, and that's why I don't like her. And that took, it was like who would have ever thought that her resentment was connected to the way her father treated her mother. But sometimes things are like that. They're like when you're really upset about something that you shouldn't be, like all your friends are saying, it's not such a big deal, and you're really upset, it can be connected to something else in your life. And if you can make that connection, it's really good, because then you can work on that. Because if you don't make that connection, it's going to keep coming up. So I don't know in her case what it is, because I don't know the situation, but maybe if you allow her to talk about it and say, what is this, talk about it, like why you don't want to resolve it, but you do want to resolve it, and why you can't stop thinking about it. And, and maybe she'll connect it with something else in her life. That's really more of the problem than this particular argument. You ever have an argument and you realize it wasn't that situation that was the problem, it was something else that was really the problem, that's why you're angry? Something unresolved or whatever. So, yeah. It's good to know these things because it's really important to have good relationships with devotees, and we don't want to, having bad relationships affects us in our bhakti. We talk about good relationships, but having good relationships really affects our bhakti a lot, and affects our chanting. And Prabhupada wants us to have good relationships. Nanita, you have a question or a comment?
Hare Krishna. I just wanted to know if you can join your forgiveness seminars whenever you hold them. How do we get in touch with you?
Let me, because we have them, I'll put them in the chat. You can go on this site and sign up. They're self-paced. At some point, we might have a combination of live and self-paced, but I'm kind of overwhelmed now. So that would be like 8 or 12 weeks. But everything is there that we teach in the live course. And then if you have any questions, you could. So we have 3 courses. One just an introduction to give you an idea, like an hour. And one is a foundational. So it should be about 5 hours. And doesn't have many exercises. And then we have another one, which is about 20 hours, which has about 30 videos, 30 lessons or so. And most of those lessons have exercises. So it's really good. If you liked what I was talking about today, then you just take the intensive one, you'll love it, because you do all these exercises. You'll have, I asked you a lot of questions. Well, these are questions from the exercises, and there's much more. So you'll love it. It's good yeah. So, and you feel free to share it. And then, I like to do these things live. I'm just starting to travel now and do more live. If you ever want to do it in your temple or area, and there's enough devotees interested, we can also consider that as well.
And how do we connect with you, Maharaj?
Just Google Mahatma. I'll give you a. And then, Facebook, Twitter, all the social media.
Okay.
And I have, the work I did on forgiveness was just an accident. I wasn't planning, it happened, but it opened up for me personally, deeper understanding of how we have to work on developing Vaishnava qualities, not just wait for them to develop. And how there are a lot of, the more we understand our own minds and emotions, the more we can control them, and the more we understand sometimes why we're acting the way we act. Because if you know what's causing you to act in a certain way, then you can change it. If you don't know, you feel helpless. Just as you'll say, it's just how I am. I'm always like this. But if you find out why you're always like that, and so I'm always like that because of this, then that could be healed, changed.
Thank you very much. I look forward to attending one of your live sessions.
Yeah. So, thank you. I think we're supposed to finish now, right? Navikishore, time's up. Is that correct? Oh, it was nice seeing you all. And if you're in Vrindavan, I'll see you. I'll be there on the 21st.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah. I mean, my body will be there. It might, after that long flight, I don't know how well it's going to be, but if you're there, you'll see me. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, I wanted to ask you one thing.
Yes.
Very nice class, Prabhuji. Thank you. When are you going to have the next Japa retreat in America?
In America? It's going to be in New Vrindavan, the last weekend in September, first weekend in October.
Oh, very nice, Prabhuji. Thank you. I've been, looking forward to attending one of those for years. And COVID hit and everything happened.
We're having one sooner, but it's just for the youth. In
see.
Florida. In Florida, we're having one. Yeah. If we're going to have one before that, it'll be on my Facebook page. HG Mahatma Dasa. That's where I advertise everything.
Perfect, Prabhuji.
Okay.
Looking forward to your association. Thank you.
I have to go because I have another class in a half hour, and I haven't eaten breakfast yet. It's early morning here. Okay, Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhupada.
Hare
Go
Krishna.
Brahman.
Jai Prabhupada.
Vanchakalpatarubhishya.